Hello, this is Simon Tate, the Head of Quality at Prevista, and welcome to the first of 5 short webinars covering Ofsted readiness under the Education Inspection Framework. So in this webinar, we'll be covering a recap of the Education Inspection Framework, or EIF as it's shortened to, and the changes that have been made. First of all, let's have a look at the judgment areas and how they've changed. So under the Common Inspection Framework, there were 4 judgment areas. There still are 4 judgment areas. However, they have changed. So on the left, you'll see that teaching, learning and assessment and outcomes have now been consolidated into one judgment area, quality of education. Now that is your key judgment area. Inspectors will spend the majority of their time looking at the quality of your education. And that's been broken down into the 3 I's, as they're now called, which is the intent, the implementation and the impact of what you do. We'll look at that a little bit in a sec. Then below that, you've got personal development, behaviour and welfare. That has now been split into 2 areas. So conversely, we've now got behaviour and attitudes and personal development. And that is demonstrating the increased emphasis on the requirement for providers to develop learners' wider capabilities and skills beyond the vocational qualification that you're delivering, and that includes things like understanding of British values and safeguarding and prevent. And at the bottom there, leadership and management remains leadership and management, but under the new inspection framework. So inspectors will come and visit you and do an inspection based across the 4 of those areas and give each of them a judgment and ultimately give you an overall judgment on your provision from grade 1, outstanding, down to hopefully not grade 4, inadequate. I've always feel that leadership and management shouldn't be higher than any of the other grades other than in special circumstances. So how can you be requiring improvement for quality of education and be outstanding managers? Surely they go hand in hand. So a bit on the first monitoring visit. Those areas, the reports for first monitoring visits are broken down into 3 different areas. The first one is how much progress leaders have made to ensure that providers are meeting all the requirements of successful apprenticeship provision. So this is key about leadership, that because you've not delivered before, they're looking at your systems, your intent, and how you've implemented that intent, and whether you're having the impact that you required from that intent. What progress have leaders and managers made by ensuring that apprentices benefit from high quality training that leads to positive outcomes for apprentices? So again, the implementation, what have you got in place? Is it working? And they will always be looking at safeguarding as a starting point. In fact, if you don't get a decent grade in safeguarding, you're not going to get a decent grade at all. So at the bottom there, I've put a link to FE Week. What I recommend is using that link on a weekly basis, because they always publish every Ofsted inspection that's come out every week, and they give you such good intel as to where people are falling down, where people are achieving, and that absolutely gives you steer as to where you should be planning, and your quality and improvement plan can feed from that. So that's the inspection model in front of you there. So they'll do the top level view. They'll speak to your Ofsted nominee for approximately 90 minutes and establish themes that they feel they want to delve into further, and they're called deep dives now. And the deep dive means that they will be deploying their inspectors, specific, maybe a couple of inspectors to a particular area to look at your information, advice and guidance, and they will disappear for a few days and just look at that. So we know we've got to be really tight in all areas. And ultimately, all their findings come together and they triangulate and come up with your final grade. So let's have a look in a bit more detail at the judgment area. So quality of education, as I say, is broken into the 3 I's. So intent, you'll see the first word there, curriculum, is a new word to the lexicon of Ofsted inspectors, and it is hugely important now, and it's reflective of the movement to standards that the industry has done. Whereas before we had frameworks where you would support a learner to achieve units, and if they're weak in a particular area, you'll give them that extra support so that they can achieve evidence that they can perform a particular task, and then you'll mark it off as complete. No longer the case. With the standards, you are building, you're teaching a group of people to be at the same standard so that they can independently stand up and demonstrate that they have all of the skills required to achieve that qualification. Compare it, if you want, to a driving test. When you do the driving test, if you're not very good at parallel parking and you manage to just achieve it once, you're probably not going to be ready to do it in front of an inspector or a driving instructor, as I should call them. Next down, we've got implementation. So again, we've got curriculum, how it's delivered. Is it delivered sequentially in the correct order? So are learners building blocks on sessions to get up to the next level so that they're challenged, stretched and challenged? Teaching and pedagogy. Now, we need our tutors to be dual professionals. Do we know what dual professionals are? I'm sure you do, but if you don't, dual professionalism is a deep knowledge and conceptual understanding and expertise in teaching and learning processes and contexts matched with expert subject knowledge and skills. So as well as your tutors, they will be expecting them to have their teaching qualifications, whether it's Petals or the newer version of that. They will also expect their subject knowledge to be up to date, and you should be ensuring that your tutors are placed within working settings each year to keep their skills up to date and fresh. And of course, at the bottom there, and this word is not going away, impact. It's the core of everything, is that when you're working with learners, you need to be demonstrating the impact that you have made and are making on their lives, their work skills, their everything, really. So they will be looking obviously at success rates, whether people are passing EPA and whether they're timely, and they'll be looking at what additional skills you've given them, and they will be looking at that initial information, advice and guidance. And that is so important when you're first enrolling that learner. Absolutely essential that initial information, advice and guidance session is thorough and covers why the learner wants to do the qualification, what they want from the qualification, what they want from wider perspective in life, whether they've got any barriers, whether they've got any weaknesses. That's what needs to be established. And then each of the reviews that are recorded, always recorded, need to build on that and demonstrate that you've taken into account, your tutors have taken into account those areas and aspirations of that learner, and they've built on them. Okay, so the next judgment area, behaviours and attitudes. This is pretty straightforward. They want learners to be focused and engaged. And again, it goes back to that initial assessment. You need to be enrolling them on the right qualification and understand their motivations so that they remain motivated to behave in a focused way, in a willingness to be stretched and challenged, and also to attend, obviously, and to be punctual. And if an Ofsted inspector is observing a session, they'll expect learners to demonstrate that, or if someone's late, to be picked up on it. Make sure your tutors know to pick up on these things. Personal development. Now, again, this goes beyond the vocational qualification. If you're doing a childcare or a construction or a hairdressing qualification, it is said already that they're doing that qualification and the aim is to achieve that. That is not what this personal development judgment area is about. It's about the wider enrichment that you're delivering, understanding of British values, understanding how to live healthily, how to keep yourself safe, and to recognise radicalism and extremism, also to be able to develop those weaknesses or barriers that development areas that are established at that initial IAG, or it could be later on. It could be that a tutor recognises something, or a learner admits to a certain development area during the programme, that you're recording that and working towards it. It could be a fear of talking in public, presenting, that you've recognised, and you're helping that learner to be able to present in front of a group of people that's going to give them further opportunities that lead to that initial career aspiration to be able to do something more advanced and to have a better career. And finally, leadership and management. We're looking here specifically, I will look at the governance point of this. Governance has become a more important area for involvement. When you read the new education inspection framework, they do expect governors to be leading and guiding on the curriculum decisions. So that intent, they need to be involved and understand that intent and be able to scrutinise the implementation of it and able to scrutinise the impact and be able to steer the delivery accordingly. So make sure your governors or your senior management team, whatever sits at the top of your organisation, is informed and understands why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and what you're getting out of it. Okay, so that's the last slide on this first webinar. What I will say is, if you have any questions, please can you email them to me at simont, SIMONT, at prevista, prevista.co.uk. And what I'll do, I'll collate any answers and I'll circulate them. So I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and I hope you will tune in to 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th in this webinar series.